Last night, it was all Brooke Lopez. How about that? Take that, Laker fan. Oh, my gosh. And joining us right now from Chicago, days after the draft lottery drama and in the midst of the NBA Combine, Sports Illustrated's Chris Mannix. How are you, Chris?
Think about what you just said there, Rich.
I know, right?
Brooke Lopez in a conference finals game. All Brooke Lopez. And this is a guy I've covered for a long time in the New York area. The fact that he's reinvented himself as this defensive stalwart / three-point gunner is really a remarkable story.
Yeah, because he did it on both. I mean, as Marv was saying, he was on fire in every facet of the game. He was a defensive, as you said, stalwart, but blocking shots and making threes and giving that stare down to the camera. And it was awesome. It really was great to see.
Well, they finished the regular season the number one defensive team in the NBA, and Lopez was a big part of that. And he was always a good defensive player when he was in Brooklyn, but there were times there, in New Jersey as well, but there were times there where he had to be off the floor in key situations because teams went small and big lumbering centers don't do all that well. He's adapted, and it's a credit to Mike Budenholzer and what he does with his system, but Brooke Lopez is a guy that you can play every minute in the fourth quarter because he'll defend at a high level and he'll be able to knock down threes like you saw last night.
Well, and in terms of me saying take that, Laker fan, I mean, John Horst, the general manager of the Bucks, pushed a ton of buttons in the offseason, and they're working out. I mean, could you imagine if Lopez did, in fact, go to the Lakers this year instead of the Bucks, what the difference might have been right there? And
this is – John Horst, who I think is just now legally allowed to buy beer. Like John Horst is if he's not the executive of the year, he's right up there with the top two or three. I mean, it seems simplistic to surround Giannis with high-level shooters, but he's the first one to really do it in the Giannis era in Milwaukee. He went out there and he identified Brooke Lopez, who – remember, the first, I think, 6 years in Brooke Lopez's career, he didn't attempt a three-pointer. The last few in New Jersey and in L.A., he was attempting a bunch of them. But he identified Brooke Lopez as a volume-shooting three-point guy, and Brooke Lopez averaged 6.5 threes this year. And he was a factor in making Giannis the MVP. Same thing with guys like Ersan Ilyasova, some of the other pieces they added. I mean, he went out, built a team around Giannis. That's a real credit to what John did in a very short time on the job.
All that said, obviously, it's just a game one. Kyle Lowry was sublime last night. He was terrific. And that said, if it wasn't for him, the doors would have been totally blown off in the fourth quarter in Milwaukee because Kawhi couldn't get a blow. And that's, I think, maybe the story so far of the Toronto postseason is it's been too much Kawhi, and then when it was finally not all Kawhi, they still couldn't pull it off. Chris, what do you think about Toronto's chances moving forward here in this series?
Yeah, I don't look at Toronto. If I'm the Raptors, I'm feeling okay about the loss. And, they needed Kyle Lowry to go crazy, and it's unlikely he does that again in the series. But it is increasingly likely that Kawhi has another phenomenal game or a bunch of phenomenal games left in him. I think Pascal Siakam can certainly play better, and he's a key to what they do. The bench guys who have been key to what they do all year, they're going to play better. And this Raptors team was, I think, an 8-point lead going into the fourth quarter? I mean, they blew it. And as much as we praise Brooke Lopez, is it likely he gets, 29 points again in the rest of the series? I think if you're Toronto, you gave them a tough fight in game one. You put yourself in great position to win game two. And if you do that, going back to Toronto, which is one of the toughest places in the NBA to play, where the Raptors have had tremendous success all season long, I still think you're reasonably confident going into the series. If you're Toronto, you can win.
Chris Mannix from Sports Illustrated back here on the Rich Eisen Show. All right, Chris, as you know, I'm well-versed in the NFL scouting combine. Never been to an NBA combine. What in the world does it look like?
It looks like something that they should blow up and never have again. It's become kind of. I mean, look, I'm not well versed at all on the NFL part of it, but
right.
In the NBA, for the last few years, and maybe it's even more than a few now, guys just don't participate. I mean, the top-tier guys. I mean, it's become a very low-level event. I mean, some guys show up. You know, the lottery guys, they'll show up, but they show up to do medical testing. They show up to do interviews with teams.
Yeah.
Some of them do media availability. But we're not going to see Zion Williamson over the next couple of days. You're not going to see, Ja Morant and Cam Reddish share a court for the next couple of days. I mean, you're just going to see fringe first and second round picks play in the 5-on-5 portion. Everybody else is just kind of getting measured out there. I mean, it has lost a lot of value when it comes to evaluating the top tier picks because the agents of these guys don't see any value in having them go out there and participate in 5-on-5s. Their position is that you've got 30-plus games and, in some cases, multiple years worth of tape on our guys. We're not going to risk them going through this, getting burned, and seeing their draft stock drop. So the thing has become kind of a great event for second-round picks, not so much if you're looking for action from the top-tier guys.
Well, then maybe it's similar to the NFL scouting combine in the fact that all the evaluators are in one place and the media is in one place and everybody's talking. There's a lot of chatter, chit-chat, rumors and conjecture, and how about that guy, or did you hear about this one? What is the main talk around the NBA combine right now, Chris?
Well, that's what it effectively is, both in the room at the combine and in the bar rooms afterwards,
that's
where
right.
everybody kind of congregates and hangs out. It's still, I think everybody is still kind of letting the dust settle on what happened in the lottery and trying to figure out exactly what it means. I mean, there was a bizarre narrative yesterday that maybe Zion goes back to Duke. I mean, I was seeing that. I know there was some stuff on ESPN about it, and it was all over social media. I mean, that's insane. I mean, Zion, first of all, to familiarize, I mean, I'm sure you know some of this, but, like, guys, you don't lose a player's rights if you draft him and he decides not to play for you. So if Zion stays in the draft, gets drafted by the Pelicans, he's a Pelican for life unless they trade him. He can go back to Duke, but that seems just bonkers given that injuries or whatever can change the course of his life. Plus, he has no idea who's going to draft him next year if he stays in the draft. It could be New Orleans again, for all he knows, with next year's lottery. So that's kind of what people are talking about. And you're already seeing today, like, some reports about Zion having a positive meeting with the Pelicans. They're going to take him, and then I think people are sort of talking about where the dust settles after that. Ja Morant is pretty solidified as the number 2 pick to Memphis. I think R.J. Barrett is pretty solidified as number 3 to New York. And after that, I think it's chaos because you're going to see some trades. You're going to see some teams that aren't overwhelmed by the talent that exists in 3 to 10, and that's where I think things are starting to heat up.
Yeah, I mean, with the Zion stuff, I was saying yesterday, and I'm sure I'll repeat it again here on the show today, and the way of me telling you here, is that have we read into the mind of a young man with our own thoughts or conjecture and rumor more than with Zion? I mean, when his shoe exploded, we were all saying, of course he's thinking about not playing at Duke anymore. He's got to protect himself for the draft lottery. And, of course, he came back and he played in the NCAA tournament. Now we're sitting here thinking, of course he doesn't want to go to New Orleans. And he's going to try and figure out a game, a way to be, like Eli Manning or John Elway, and to use the NFL analogies of somebody saying, I don't want to go play for that team. Maybe he's just a young kid who's just excited to play basketball, and he's ready to go to the NBA. And, obviously the question is, what does New Orleans do here, Chris?
Well, I mean, I agree with you that he's a guy that just wants to play basketball. I mean, plus he's a kid from the South too, so playing in New Orleans I don't think is unappealing to him. And I love the people that are, if the Knicks got the number 1 pick, the first thing the Knicks would do would be try to trade him to New Orleans. So he might wind up in New Orleans anyway, because of the Anthony Davis aspect of all this. The Pelicans, Rich, they're going to draft him. And then they're going to let the chips fall where they may. I don't think that, and I talked to David Griffin about this the other night, the public stance remains, we're going to try to convince Anthony Davis to stay. Privately, they know Davis doesn't want to be there. He's not going to sign an extension, and it's too big a risk to keep him on the roster all season long if you don't have an extension in place. You just can get too much value back in return. But what the draft now does and the lottery does, it slows the timetable down. Like, they can take their time. They can draft Zion, go into July, wait till free agency dust settles, and then decide where to flip Anthony Davis. I don't think it goes beyond the summer because I think his value decreases and the increase of injury is still there with Davis. But I think this is the kind of deal that unless they get overwhelmed by something, you're going to be in mid-July, maybe late July, with Anthony Davis still on the Pelicans. So what this does is give David Griffin a little bit of breathing room to make the Zion draft pick and to figure out what he wants to do with AD.
Well, with the way that the ping pong balls bounced and settled, Chris Mannix of Sports Illustrated here, which situation do you think is affected more, Anthony Davis's or Kevin Durant's on July 1st? Chris?
I think, it's a good question. I think Kevin Durant might be affected in a roundabout way. I mean, if Zion went to the Knicks and either they kept him or traded him, that would have been another incentive for Kevin Durant to want to be in New York. Now, if they do draft an R.J. Barrett who, nominally plays kind of the same position as Durant, what does that mean? I don't want to read too much into a draft pick and what it means for Kevin Durant. But, with Davis, I think that he was always going to get traded. This shakes up the board a little bit when it comes to who can offer what. The Lakers put themselves, I think, in a much better position, and they know it. With that fourth pick in the draft, they can now couple with their other players. Boston certainly is looking at the Lakers, thinking maybe that offer is going to need to be trumped if they decide to go all in on Anthony Davis. So I think that with Davis, he was always going to get dealt. It just changed. The lottery just changed the types of offers that can be made.
And last one for you. You are closely covering the Celtics. What do you think of Terry Rozier's first take tour and what it does, in fact, mean for the Celtics in this offseason? Looks like they're certainly not going to run it back, Chris, right?
No. Yeah, no. It's unlikely, I would say. I don't think anything is impossible when it comes to that organization. I talked to a few people in Boston after Rozier did what he did. They weren't too bothered by it. They felt that he's an inexperienced sort of TV guy who kind of got caught speaking off the cuff a little bit on these debate shows that he's really not all that familiar with. But all that being said, Terry Rozier didn't do himself any favors coming into free agency. He burned a little bit of the bridge with Boston. I don't know if it's entirely torched, but it's a little bit scorched. And for every other team out there, Terry Rozier effectively said that unless I'm going to be a starter, I'm not going to be happy. So if there are teams that are looking at him as, a kind of a combo guard backup or whatever and are willing to pay, maybe they rethink that observation. Now, Rozier might want out of Boston, Rich, but I don't know that Danny Ainge is going to let him. Like, he's a restricted free agent. And Danny Ainge comes from the 1980s. He played basketball with Bird and McHale and Parrish, and he played on teams that didn't always like each other, but they won because of their talent. Danny Ainge has always been about accruing as much talent as possible, and Rozier, for all his warts, is still a talent. So as much as he might want out of Boston, I think the Celtics are still going to be willing to match a lot of offers that come his way.
Chris, I would say enjoy the rest of the scouting combine, but I got the drift. You're not a big fan, so.
Well, I'm not a fan of the whole process. It's fun being out here. Everybody's in one place, and you can kind of catch up with whoever you need to catch up with. I would just like to be sitting there and see Cam Reddish and R.J. Barrett, teammates at Duke, go at it in a 5-on-5 setting. That's more my thing.
Just to extrapolate this out before I let you go. I mean, in the NFL, the top number one overall pick quarterback, Kyler Murray, didn't throw there, but he did show up, obviously, and he didn't do anything except the measurement and the interviews and all that sort of stuff. But pretty much everybody else does. That said, if they played like an 11-on-11 scrimmage or some sort of 7-on-7s, I think agents would raise their hand and say, there's no way we're going to let them do something physical. So if the main engine of evaluation at this combine is a 5-on-5, I can kind of see what everybody's talking about. Plus, if there's only 60 draft choices, too, like in the NBA.
Yeah, and look, but the problem too is that this has kind of bled into individual workouts as well. It used to be where agents would allow guys to play against each other top tier prospects in closed settings, but because sometimes that stuff got out and guys look bad, they don't do that anymore. So you got basically the pageantry of this week, and then when guys come in for individual workouts, it's man versus chair or man versus broom shooting jump shots over. You don't see that individual stuff, which is unfortunate because that's another part of the process I like to hear about.
By the way, that's one of my favorite underused words in sarcasm is pageantry, Chris. Well done. I like that.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Thanks for the call, Chris. Appreciate it.
You got it, Rich.
You got it. That's Chris Mannix, at SI Chris Mannix on Twitter here on The Rich Eisen Show.
For more of The Rich Eisen Show, tune to Audience Channel 239 on DirecTV for free on BR Live or download the Rich Eisen Show app.